Hey guys, Max with HobbyKing back with more from our Glue and Go series, and today we have the Volador. I'm joined with Alex Davis because we have an aerobatic foamy, and he's the most aerobatic foamy guy we know in the office. So this guy, as I mentioned, aerobatic foamy plane, a little more of an F3P style with all your side force generators and your drag brakes, with all the carbon reinforcement everywhere, but really good flying plane, and Alex is gonna put it through its paces right now.
Sounds good.
Alright guys, so we are back in the studio with the build for the Volador. Now with our Glue and Go series, all of the build equipment and build supplies are very similar. So you're going to need some foam safe glue, foam safe CA, and hot glue. And then you're going to need some general building tools, screwdrivers, Allen keys, X-Acto knives, and some cutters to do your full build. Now the equipment we used is a little bit different. We were going for more of a light F3P setup since this plane is a little bit more of an indoor pattern style ship. So we went with a similar setup that we have on our Yak. We used an SK3 motor, the 2122 1570 kV motor. That's equipped with a plush 12 amp ESC. We used one 9-gram HXT 900 servo for the ailerons and two 4.5 gram servos for the elevator and the rudder. So the first step on the build is to install a carbon strip into the nose using foam glue, and now this is going to be the 95mm carbon strip that's included with the kit. The next step is going to be installing the 716mm strip of carbon into the horizontal wing. Next step is going to be installing the 75mm carbon strips into the ailerons. Those are going to be the ones on the outboard part of the ailerons. After that, we're going to install two carbon strips onto the inner part of the ailerons. Those are going to be the 81mm carbon strips. And then while we're doing that, we're going to be gluing in our control horns for our ailerons. Next up, we're going to flip the wing over and install the 322mm carbon strip into the ailerons. Same thing on both sides. After that, we're going to be reinforcing the leading edge of the wing using the 597mm carbon strip. Again, that's going to be glued across the leading edge of the wing. Next step is going to be installing the carbon strips into the horizontal stabilizer. So that is going to be the two 70mm strips, and they are going to be installed on the outboard edges of your horizontal stab. Next up after that is going to be installing the 310mm carbon strip, and that's going to go across the elevator control surface. The next step is going to be installing the carbon reinforcements into the rudder assembly. Now this involves three pieces of carbon. There's going to be one piece of carbon at the top is the 65mm piece. The long one going diagonally is going to be the 200mm piece, and the one going across the bottom of the rudder is going to be the 115mm piece, and you'll see once that installed, it sort of looks like a Z. So now that we've got all the carbon installed in the fuselage, we can go ahead and continue on with the build. So the next step is going to be gluing on the nose of the plane to the horizontal fuselage. Then we're going to install the horizontal tail and glue that onto the rest of the horizontal fuselage. Next up after that is to install our aileron servo. So since we're going to be putting the vertical fuselage on top, we're going to want to make sure our servo is already centered and set prior to installing it. Then once that is installed, we can go ahead and assemble our vertical fuselage onto the horizontal fuselage. And as with our other glue and goes, you're going to want to make sure that the vertical fuselage is square with the horizontal fuselage. Next up, we're going to be installing our elevator and rudder servos, and since this is going to be blocked off with some reinforcement, you're going to want to, again, make sure that your servos are centered and set prior to installing them. Next up, we're going to be reinforcing the fuselage. So inside your kit, you're going to see 4 EPP strips that sort of have lightning holes cut out in them. You're going to take 2 of them and glue them on the sides of the upper vertical fuselage between the vertical and the horizontal fuselage. Once that's done, we just have a little bit more carbon to install, and that's going to be the reinforcement for the horizontal tail. So there's going to be 2 carbon strips you're going to take and install on the horizontal tail from the top of the vertical to the far corners of the horizontal stabilizer. So next up, we're going to be setting up our push rods for all of our control surfaces. Now, the way these are set up uses a Z-bend with heat shrink. It's a little bit of an old school foamy building technique, but it's light and sturdy. So we're going to take one of our carbon rods, we're going to put a little piece of the heat shrink over it, we're going to sit the Z-bend inside the heat shrink, and we're going to shrink the heat shrink over the Z-bend and the carbon rod. I like to add a little bit of CA to these. It helps to reinforce the joint here and make sure the Z-bend doesn't wiggle inside the heat shrink. And once that's all done, we can go ahead and install our push rods for all of our control surfaces, and you're going to want to make sure, again, to use the included plywood guides for your tail surfaces so you don't get any flex in your push rods. Once that's done, we can install our landing gear. So we're going to make sure to install the plastic reinforcement pieces for the landing gear, and then we can go ahead and install the carbon landing gear. Next up, we're going to install our carbon tail skid, and that just goes into the slot on the rear of the fuselage. Then we're going to go ahead and install our motor, and again, that's going to be similar to our other glue and goes where you can use the included motor mount, but if you're using a slightly different motor than we are, you can use the included motor mount with your motor. Now finally, we're going to install the side force generators and drag brake on the rear of the fuselage. The side force generators are going to be installed on the outboard parts of the wing, and then the drag brake is going to be installed on the rear on the little tabs that stick off of your rudder. And then set the CG on your plane, which is going to be 3 centimeters in front of the main carbon strip across the wing. So that's going to wrap up the build for the Volador. As you guys can see, really nice flying F3P style EPP plane. Great, again, if you want to get into indoor or lightweight foamy flying. Part of our Glue and Go series, which we have a few more of those planes coming out for you guys, so make sure you keep a lookout for that. Subscribe to HobbyKing Live, and we'll see you in the next one.